This is a complex relationship and it spans a vast array of topics. There's some common ground between Australia and China, but there are also some profound points of difference. And if you list them, you spend quite a bit of time going through them. Now, I think two in particular are worth noting. There's been quite a bit of talk about China's attitude towards the Australian government's move to effectively strip a Chinese company, Landbridge, of the Port of Darwin lease. That's because of the strategic sensitivities over that site. Now, there's been a bit of a steady drumbeat in Chinese media, including state media, over this, suggesting that the Chinese government was likely to press Mr. Albanese quite firmly over this and essentially try to force him to back down. But when Mr. Albanese was asked about this during his press conference, he said that President Xi didn't raise it at all during their meeting, suggesting perhaps that, the president sees this as a done deal and a fait accompli. I guess it's also possible that instead of President Xi raising this, it might be Premier Li who raises it tonight. But either way, it's clear that the Chinese government is happy to, send messages on the Port of Darwin through the media, but it's not keen to burn too much capital at those leader-to-leader level meetings on the topic. Now, the other one worth highlighting just briefly, of course, is the question around China's live fire exercises in the Tasman Sea. That happened just a few months ago, sending shockwaves through Australia's military establishment. Now, the Prime Minister said today that he raised these exercises with Australia, including the fact that China didn't really give adequate notice for its live fire exercises, forcing flights to depart. But the Prime Minister also made it very clear, I think, in that press conference that President Xi essentially waved off Australia's concerns, simply saying that China would continue to conduct, military exercises where it was obliged to do so or where it was able to do so, and suggesting that Australia did the same thing, and therefore it was entirely justifiable. So that seems to be, on the face of it, pretty clear evidence that China is drawing a clear link between Australia's military exercises in waters where China would rather see them absent, like in the South China Sea, and what Beijing is doing in Australia's near waters. It seems China is suggesting to Anthony Albanese that what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
And Stephen, how has China characterized this meeting between the two leaders?
Well, unsurprisingly, Chinese state media and, to a degree, the Chinese government has been keen to portray this as a very positive and sunny meeting. You can see why they'd do that. Australia, like many other countries, is grappling with the full implications of the Trump administration's isolationism, its unpredictability, its trade agenda, which in many ways has turned the existing order upside down. So it's obvious that China spots potentially an opportunity here to try and coax Australia away from its closest security ally. For Australia, it's a difficult terrain that it has to confront. On the one hand, yes, it's dismayed by what the Trump administration is doing, and it can find, to a degree, some common cause with China on trade. But on the other hand, it wasn't that long ago that China was imposing its own economic coercive measures against Australia in retaliation for political disputes. And Australia also does want and need the United States to remain engaged and present in Asia as part of its efforts to really balance growing Chinese power in the region. So it's a difficult and fraught line that the Prime Minister has to walk, not just during his meetings here in Beijing, but more broadly as he tries to balance between two great superpowers.
And Stephen, the day isn't quite over yet for Anthony Albanese. So what is the Prime Minister doing tonight, and what does his schedule look like tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a pretty frenetic schedule that the Prime Minister has, Girish. At the moment, he's still meeting with Premier Li during a banquet that's being held for political leaders, but also for business CEOs from both Australia and China, which have just wrapped up a roundtable here in Beijing, focused on the economic opportunities that both countries face. They've put forward a plan for both governments to try and deepen integration between the two economies. Many of these ideas are unremarkable. All of them look pretty worthy on the face of it. But tomorrow the Prime Minister's focus is going to be less on the business relationship and more on symbolism. He's flagged publicly that he's going to head to the Great Wall of China tomorrow to admire what is a really extraordinary historical site. In that sense, of course, he's following in the footsteps not just of Malcolm Fraser, who I think might be the last Australian Prime Minister to visit the Great Wall, but also Gough Whitlam, who of course played such an incredibly important role essentially normalising ties between Australia and the People's Republic of China back in the 1970s. Clearly the Prime Minister wants to gesture towards that symbolism during that visit and to try and position Labor as the natural party of government for Australia-China relations. There'll be some interesting symbolism around this, Girish, but as ever, the government will be conscious of the fact that Australia and China have radically different visions for the region and how it should work. It will be conscious that it's going to have to be careful not to irritate or push the Trump administration offside as it tries to push forward with this relationship. So there are an awful lot of equities that the Prime Minister has to balance as he presses on with this very lengthy visit to China.
Okay, Stephen Dziedzic, we know that it's been an equally frantic schedule for you, so really appreciate your reporting there from Beijing. Thank you so much.